The Pure Nutrition channel will help you follow a natural way to detoxify your body, alleviate the symptoms of aging, and protect you from the threat of serious diseases. This channel is dedicated exclusively to natural methods to improve your health and protect your organs. Subscribe to the Pure Nutrition channel now and start your journey to better health and well-being. The link to the channel is in the description below this video. Take care of yourself and be healthy. Recently, there has been dampness in some areas of our house. Some places have more dampness than others. Although I always checked and maintained our basement to prevent any odors from entering the house, the basement itself had a normal smell. However, not long ago, there were several days of rain, and I thought that might be the cause. I remembered that I had small containers with tablets that absorb moisture and unpleasant odors somewhere, so I went to the pantry to look for them. Soon, I found the boxes, but they were empty. I began searching for spare tablets to put in the containers. My wife, Alice, found me engaged in this activity when she returned from the store, bringing several bags of groceries. "What are you looking for so diligently?" she asked me. I briefly explained the situation to her, and she replied that she had stopped by a specialized service on the way, and called a specialist who could figure out the cause, as even regular ventilation didn't help much. Yes, but until he arrives, we still need to find them. It's strange, because I always put them together with the boxes. Where could they have disappeared to? While I was still searching, Alice prepared lunch, and then we heard a knock on the door. It was a man in a special suit. I was even a little surprised that he arrived so quickly. He introduced himself as Donald, the specialist my wife had called. I let him into the house, and he immediately began inspecting almost every inch of our rooms. Then he went outside with his instruments and started checking the soil there. Does he really know what he's doing? I asked my wife, approaching her and noticing his peculiar, in my opinion, movements. Yes, it's a very good company. My acquaintances recommended it. By the way, lunch is ready. Maybe we should invite Donald. It's a bit awkward that we'll be eating, and he'll be wandering around us. But it's his job. Who is he for us to immediately invite him to the table? My wife's idea seemed absurd to me. During lunch, I asked her if the children had called because my birthday was approaching, and they usually always came to us for our celebrations. Alice replied that she would call them only in the evening, and then arrange with them, explaining that the event was still almost a month away, and she would have time to organize everything. Meanwhile, Donald had finished his work, digging small holes in several places in our yard. When I asked him why he was doing this, he started talking to me in terms I didn't understand, and I only realized that he had taken some samples. When he left, I started getting ready to go to the store. I told my wife that I would stock up on moisture-absorbing tablets, because I couldn't find the ones we had. "Oh, could you stop by that corner store and pick up my order?" I completely forgot. I remembered only when I entered my office. They should deliver a set for work and special paints. Take the receipt so you can pick up everything. Alice handed me a small sheet. "Are you serious? When did you manage to order this? The amount is quite decent. Can you consult with me? You still have something to work with. Expenses have already exceeded the norm this month." "Oh, stop it. There was a promotion going on. I couldn't pass up the opportunity. It would have cost a lot more in a week. You just bought parts for your car, and I'm not allowed to spend a dime now. But there's also a holiday coming up. We need funds for that. Sometimes I feel like you're not thinking about me at all, only about your whims. We didn't live extravagantly enough to afford unforeseen expenses. Some time ago, I got a slight raise, but I still didn't think money should be spent recklessly. Moreover, I wanted to celebrate my milestone, 50 years with dignity. Well, we didn't plan to celebrate a holiday in a restaurant. Both our sons had their own families now, and they had children of their own. First and foremost, I cared about having plenty of delicious food and arranging the space in the yard. We also needed to spend a little on decorations. Alice, on the other hand, took a more carefree approach to this. But what did I expect from a woman? It's in their nature to spend money. However, over the years of our married life, I hoped that she would behave more prudently and understand that, besides everything, it was necessary to set aside some amount for unforeseen circumstances. My wife used to work in a museum in the antique department, but then something happened, and she had to leave that job. She told me back then that she just had a falling out with the management, but it seemed to me that it wasn't the whole truth, and she was hiding something from me. However, over time, I stopped thinking about it, and Alice found her calling in restoring antique toys. She unexpectedly discovered a talent for it, and we even converted one of the rooms for her work. For a couple of years now, she has been doing this, and besides the pleasure of the activity, she also earned money from it. Sometimes the monthly sum for her work exceeded even her previous salary, and Alice was simply delighted with it. I understood her desires and interests, and asked her only not to spend too much this month. However, it seemed that my wife did not take my request seriously, and now this issue with dampness appeared. The next day, Donald came to us again and informed us that due to recent explosions in old mines, there was a possibility of dampness in our home. Located somewhere a couple of dozen kilometers from our house, a crack may have formed in the inner layers of the soil. Most likely, another underground river had formed there, reaching our yard, and it might be the cause of the damp. Our house was located outside the city, and we deliberately bought it in a place where nothing like this should happen, and it hadn't happened until now. Donald even thanked us for paying attention to it and planned to pass the case on to specialized services. But for ourselves, he said it would be best to move to another place, as the outcome of all this was unknown. Work on the mines was still planned, and this could have had other consequences. I didn't want to leave the house where we had lived comfortably and peacefully for so many years, and we had invested so much effort and money into it. I decided that we would stay in place, at least until we celebrated my birthday. And then, if the situation did not improve, we would need to start looking for a new home. Blame passed. Sometimes, a team of workers could be seen near our house, doing their job and conducting some research. Donald was also working there. In a couple of weeks after the start of these events, I somehow returned home a bit earlier and discovered that this Donald was sitting in our living room, and Alice was treating him to drinks and snacks as if he were her best friend. I don't understand. What is he doing here? I asked my wife as soon as I saw him. Oh, come on! He identified such a problem for us. Consider him not a stranger anymore. I just invited him to have a snack a bit. He's been out there all day today on that field behind the yard under the sun. You might as well have invited the whole team here. I replied discontentedly, so that he's not in our house anymore. I'll go and invite them, sarcastically said my wife when he headed to escort the unwanted guest. A couple of days later, these workers set up a little farther away. However, I still decided to check if he came to us again, and unexpectedly returned home earlier. But this time, only my wife was at home. At that moment, I understood that I was jealous of her to this Donald. She was 6 years younger than me and always took care of herself, so her appearance at her age remained quite attractive. Moreover, Donald in his 40s looked quite good too. I tried not to neglect myself, but for some reason, I was afraid that Alice might notice someone else. Recently, a friend of mine told me his sad story of divorcing his wife, and the reason for it was her infidelity. She explained it only by being tired of him over the years and wanting something new. Of course, I tried to trust my wife. I loved her, and she did not give any reason for jealousy. But now it seemed different, and I was afraid that she might make some crazy move. However, a few more days of peculiar observation led to nothing, and then these workers simply disappeared and I continued to go to work calmly. One morning, on the way from home to work, when I had already covered a decent distance, I decided to call my colleague and say that I would be a little late. I was a little late because I had a toothache and decided to visit the dentist. As I fumbled in my pocket, I realized that I had forgotten my phone at home. Whether I liked it or not, I had to turn back. Upon returning, still in the car, I noticed that Donald's car was parked near the courtyard again. At first I thought he had returned and was checking something, but no matter how hard I looked, I didn't see him anywhere outside. But entering the house, I heard Alice chatting happily with someone. Entering the living room, I saw him in our house again. And now he was not in his work uniform, but dressed casually as if it were his day off. Alice herself was sitting with her back to me at that moment and turned around only when Donald raised his eyes to me. "Doug, what are you doing here?" she asked immediately. "I live here, actually." "What is he doing here again?" I asked with some anger in my voice. I hadn't even left home when he appeared in the house. "I can explain everything," my wife began. "Yes, try." "And what the hell is this?" I asked when I noticed that they were not just talking, but also drinking wine from our cellar. "Oh, well, he did such a good job, so I wanted to thank him. And that's why you're sitting here almost naked with him and drinking." I asked, noticing that she was only wearing a light robe she had been wearing since the morning. "What are you talking about? I just didn't have time to change." What's wrong with you? But I pushed her away, so she wouldn't stand in my way, and headed towards this insolent guy to now kick him out less politely. Something told me he didn't just come here for nothing, and he didn't have just professional relations with my wife. However, Donald apparently guessed my intentions and immediately stood up, taking a defensive position, but my fist was already heading towards his face. Get out of here. What do you think you're doing, scoundrel? Why were you even invited here? I said, and pushed him back onto the couch with a nice uppercut. Dude, what's wrong with you? He started. Are you out of your mind? Alice called me herself to check on something else. Get out of here. I grabbed him by the collar and began pushing him towards the door. I myself didn't know why I suddenly felt a surge of rage, but I wasn't going to apologize for my actions. This was my home, and I didn't want someone wandering around without my consent. Donald, however, tried to defend himself both physically and verbally, hoping to calm me down and prove that he was not guilty, but I remained firm and only calmed down a bit when he was already outside the door. Then I returned to my wife and started demanding explanations for what was happening. Our conversation turned into an argument, and I even forgot about the toothache, only remembering it when she decided to slap me in response to my accusations. You're just an owner, old enough to be jealous. Why do you even think there's something between me and him? She replied after giving me a slap. So I'm old for you, and you decided to find yourself a younger one. I grabbed her by the arm and then pushed her onto the couch. So look at yourself. You went to him as if you were a whore. I know your kind. As soon as the husband is out the door, you do this. But lie. Why are you doing this to me? Listen, Doug. Well, sorry. Maybe I did something a little wrong, but you're just acting like a goat. Look at yourself. You always have to save money, and I have no right to wear a robe. Do you think I should look like a nun? I'm a woman. I can walk around my house as I please. Her words somehow infuriated me even more. Don't forget that I picked you up from the street once. If it weren't for me, what would you have become then? I gave you a roof over your head, helped you get an education. I tolerated even your antics when you spent money in stores on new clothes. And what did I get in return? I just demand love and respect. And you. I waved my hand and went to look for my phone. I tuned herself. My tooth ached again, so I went to the hospital. Besides the toothache, I felt annoyed to realize that Alice might be cheating on me. It was worse and more painful to me than if our house had fallen down. Although I wanted to believe my wife, my inner voice told me that she was lying to me. Nevertheless, after the doctor's visit, at work I pondered for a while how I could check to see if my wife was lying to me, and I decided that it would be appropriate to put a couple of hidden cameras at home, and then I would know exactly what was going on at home while I wasn't there. I left work a little early and stopped by a special store. There, I bought everything I needed. Now I just had to install everything and connect a special program on my phone. Just arriving home, I noticed that Alice had cleaned up and a delicious aroma wafted from the kitchen. I was pleasantly surprised that she was behaving again as she did in the early years of our life together. She greeted me and immediately invited me to the table. At first, I thought that maybe the kids had already come to visit, but there was no sound of anyone. And Alice herself said that she wanted to make amends for her morning actions and had prepared one of my favorite dishes. You shouldn't have gotten so upset in the morning, she said as we sat down at the table and I was about to try the dish. You offended a person who was just doing his job. I even thought that after that, he wouldn't want anything to do with us. But later, he came by again. What? I interrupted her. I told you he shouldn't show up here anymore. How dare you disobey me? Can you let me finish? He genuinely cares about us. That's it. It's enough. I even nervously threw my fork away and stood up from the table. My appetite was completely gone. I don't want to hear from him again. Richard Clannis on the HLE. I left for my office and tried to distract myself by reading a book. After a short while, I once again noticed the unpleasant dampness and decided to call the service to find out why they hadn't resolved the issue yet. A voice I didn't recognize answered, introducing himself as Thomas Williams. He explained that he had been appointed to oversee the work just a couple of days ago, but had already familiarized himself with everything. He also informed me that the soil beneath our house was currently very unstable, and he wondered why we hadn't moved out yet. However, this was my home, and I had put so much effort into it over the years. It wasn't easy to part with this place, especially considering the peaceful surroundings and the beautiful view of the distant forests and mountains. That night, I once again ignored the expert's advice, hoping that there was a solution to the problem. Then my eyes fell on the camera bag, and I remembered my initial plan. After waiting for my wife to fall asleep, I placed a few cameras in the living room, bedroom, kitchen, and her office. I also put a camera in my office, just in case. The next 2 days passed relatively peacefully. I occasionally checked the monitor on my phone, but there was no indication of my wife's infidelity. However, one day, when I opened the app during my free time, I noticed that Donald was back in our house. At first, he acted as if he was there to inspect the walls, floors, and but after completing his inspection, they talked more, and Alice even seated him at the small table in the living room. Soon, a bottle of wine and snacks appeared, and Alice had even freshened up as if preparing for a date. When she sat next to him, I saw their conversation take a different turn, and then they held hands and he leaned in. I couldn't bear to watch their subsequent kisses, but now I was certain that Alice had chosen this scoundrel over me. Filled with anger, I dropped everything and rushed home. However, the traffic lights seemed to be against me, turning red one after another, delaying my arrival. Finally, I reached home and saw that Donald's car was still parked in the yard. In a furious state, I headed straight to the living room where I had placed the cameras. But they were not there, so I searched the entire house. I found Alice in the kitchen, pretending to cook. "Where is he?" I asked in a rage. "Who? And tell you what?" My wife replied in surprise. "Oh, you damn whore." I yelled, slapping her. "Tell me, where is he? Where's that scumbag?" I continued down the hallway, hoping to find him. Be unperturbed. He emerged from the basement. "Oh, Doug, how nice to see you," he said. But I didn't listen to him and immediately hit him in the face again, causing him to fall backward and roll down the stairs. "What are you doing?" My wife approached from behind. "Shut up, bitch. Do you also want to join him? Now you'll get it too. You said there was nothing between you and him?" I quickly returned to the living room, grabbed the camera from the shelf, and threw it in her direction. "I saw you. Damn bastards." Seeing the camera, Alice stopped and stared at it, as if petrified. Meanwhile, I heard Donald trying to climb up from the basement. I rushed there again to finish what I had started. I wanted to properly explain to this scoundrel that he should never dare to intrude into my home and my family again. And as soon as he appeared, holding his hand, which seemed to have been broken in the fall, and groaning, I immediately kicked him in the face again. Donald couldn't hold on and tumbled down again. My wife attacked me from behind, screaming that I had gone mad, and I had to push her away again. I intended to deal with her later. At the moment, all my anger was directed towards Donald. But as soon as I was about to go down to him, I felt the floor beneath my feet noticeably shaking. In our area, there were sometimes slight tremors of earthquakes, but they were always quite weak and very rare. Moreover, when we bought the house, the realtor assured us that it was built sturdy enough. However, I decided not to take any risks and, grabbing my wife's hand, ran outside, heading away from the house. Considering the information I had recently received over the phone, anything could happen. As soon as we were outside the yard, creaking and cracking sounds were heard, and when I turned around, I saw cracks appearing on the walls of the house, initially thin but then widening. The ground beneath our feet was also trembling, and I tried to maintain balance while Alice clung to me as if holding onto a lifebuoy. This lasted for a few seconds. We stood outside for a couple more minutes, hoping it would end there, but the tremors repeated. My wife and I moved even further away. I glanced at our house and saw that one wall was beginning to collapse, taking a piece of the roof with it. Damn it! Donald and Thomas were right when they said we should leave, but I still hoped that not everything was so grim and that we could rebuild this part of the house. The tremors ceased. Ordering my wife to stay outside, I cautiously approached the house. The entrance remained intact, but when I looked inside, I saw that several beams had collapsed. Then I heard Donald groaning, calling for help. I wanted to leave him there under the rubble, and I was even angry that he hadn't died. Nevertheless, at that moment, he was a person in need of help, and I carefully went inside. He's navigating through the debris. I saw Donald's waving hand, and he continued to call for help. "You know, after you dared to touch my wife, I should have left you here and finished you off. I beg you, help." "Yes, I'm guilty, but forgive me," he pleaded. I started pulling him out, and it turned out that a piece of the collapsed wall had pinned his leg. I searched for something like a lever, found a pry bar, and after a few efforts, managed to free him from the trap. Additionally, I noticed that water was gathering in one corner. "What is this?" I asked aloud. It's an underground river that formed recently. I told you this could happen. I came today to warn you, because it could happen at any moment. I saw how you warned. I felt like hitting him again, but he looked so pathetic that I just replied, "Forgive me." But Alice really started everything first. I just couldn't resist. From a distant corner, another crack was heard, and realizing that staying there was extremely dangerous, I hurried to exit, dragging Donald along. When we were outside, I expected the house to continue sagging and collapsing, but it seemed that everything had stopped, at least for now. Alice's lamentations were heard as soon as we appeared on the street, and when I brought the poor guy to the car, I realized that he wouldn't be able to drive himself. I sat him in my car to take him to the hospital. Alice remained silent throughout the journey, as did Donald. He only occasionally moaned during bouts of pain. I occasionally glanced at the rear seat, where he sat through the rearview mirror. But at the same time, I also called the rescue service and reported what happened to our house. I told the operator where we were heading and that they could find us there if needed. As I drove through the streets, I noticed some minor damage. It looked like the wave had traveled underneath the whole town. When I got to the hospital, I saw that we weren't the only ones hurt. But there weren't too many people hurt, and the doctors were able to take Donald from me at once to give him the help he needed. We were examined too, but I already knew we were fine. It was only my heart that was broken by my wife. Dag, she said when we were alone in the examination room. But I wanted to tell you. It's what to say. What else can you say? I've understood everything, but I don't understand why you treated me like this. I didn't do anything wrong to you, and you gave me such a gift. In a melancholic mood, I even lowered my head. I didn't want to look at her. I'm sorry, you were so sure that I was cheating on you, and you pressured me so much that I just decided to do it despite you so you wouldn't just accuse me. I did notice the camera, and I intentionally invited Donald. Have you completely lost your mind? I was shocked by what I heard. The cutest scum. I stood up and headed for the exit. Where are you going? Alice asked. Japroits. Although what the hell is home now? Maybe it's good that it's destroyed. Because you destroyed our family. I left, leaving her alone. I wanted to go to the house, check if there was anything else happening, but saw it on the way, my eldest son called. He said he learned about the earthquake from the news and asked how we were. I reassured him that we were fine, but admitted that the house was damaged and the authorities recommended finding a new place to live. My son suggested we stay with him for a while, but I refused, grateful for his support and offer. He lived in a big city, and I loved our town. It wasn't large, but it was very comfortable for me, with beautiful scenery around. I just needed to find a new home for myself. Fortunately, the insurance company took care of it, and soon they provided us with a new place. It was on the other side of town, and the view wasn't as magnificent, but it was still a home. On the day everything happened, I went to my former house from the hospital. Several special services had already gathered there. When I explained that I used to live there, a sturdy guy approached me and introduced himself as Thomas Williams. He said that this plot was no longer suitable for living, and the remnants of the house would eventually sink even further into the ground. Many things were left there, and I could only retrieve the essentials. Then I returned to the hospital, where Alice still remained. I needed to tell her that we would have to live somewhere else for now. However, I couldn't find her where I left her. When I asked a passing nurse, she told me which room she had seen Alice in. When I approached, I realized it was Donald's room. Alice was indeed there, and it seemed a bit strange that she went to him. But maybe she just wanted to know how he was. When I entered, I noticed she was holding his hand. But upon seeing me, she immediately distanced herself from him. So you decided to continue after all? Isn't what happened enough for you? Dad, The what? Just don't say you came to inquire about his health. I can see it in your shameless eyes. She stood up and came towards me. You know, you're right. I do like him. I don't even know why. Maybe we've been together for too long. I'm just tired of everything. Every day's the same. And Donald promised me to travel with him, visit different places. And his work is so interesting. Wait, travel where? And he doesn't work there anymore. Thomas told me that he was fired 2 days ago. Apparently, he deliberately manipulated things to make houses collapse and charge people extra money for additional services. While I was talking, Donald looked at me with a frightened look. Why are you silent? I addressed him. Don't relax too much. There will be an investigation. Maybe you planted something in our house too, huh? I had already wanted to approach him again, and even approached him, grabbing him by the collar, but at that moment the doctor entered the room, and I had to let him go. After all, an unpleasant fate awaits him now. But how? What do you say? My wife began again when I had already left the room, and she followed me. Doug, well, forgive me. I spoke nonsense. But it's only because you made me do it. Made you? I stopped and turned to her. How can a husband make his wife lie with another man? I mean, you know what? If he's so important to you, then go to him. Doug, get lost. I no longer wanted anything, not even to celebrate my anniversary, which was just a few days away. I just wanted peace. I couldn't forgive my wife for this act, and instead of preparing for the holiday, I filed for divorce and told her to go in any direction. Ironically, I didn't even have to bother with packing my things. They were all buried under the rubble. The next day, our eldest son arrived in our town and brought the youngest with him. They found me in the hotel where I was temporarily staying. They came by themselves without their wives and children. Later, they helped me settle into my new home. Unfortunately, I had to tell them that their mother no longer loved me and had betrayed me because I couldn't hide our divorce from them, and Elise herself didn't keep quiet. And when the new house was ready, my sons helped me move in and organized a celebration for me. I naturally wasn't in the mood for festivities, especially since they invited Alice, hoping that we would reconcile. But I didn't want to disappoint the children, so I forced a smile. I never forgave Alice, and I also learned the real reason she left her job 2 years ago. It turns out she had an affair with her boss, and then demanded a promotion from him. But he refused and simply fired her, and she never dared to tell anyone about it because she knew it would reach my ears. I happened to meet her former boss in the hospital on the same day and talk to him. Now I understood that cheating was in her nature. Maybe she had cheated on me before, and I just didn't notice. But now it's over with her, and I decided to start a new chapter in my life. Story 2. I'm 36 years old, and my wife is 38. We first crossed paths when I was in my 3rd year of college, and she was in her 4th. Since that day, we've been together. After dating for 3 years, we made the decision to move in together. Then, after 3 more years, we tied the knot. 2 years after that, our happiness grew when my wife became pregnant, and we welcomed our daughter into the world. It's like any typical family. We had our fair share of domestic disagreements, but we always managed to reconcile swiftly, sometimes even in the middle of an argument. In general, we were a traditional family. Once I completed my education, I embarked on my career journey, working hard to climb the corporate ladder. Eventually, I earned enough to afford a spacious 4-room apartment. We invested significantly in renovating it and happily settled into our new home. My wife, after her maternity leave, resumed her career, which went quite smoothly. She secured a good position and started earning a decent income. With our combined earnings, we achieved financial prosperity. Over time, we acquired everything we needed, including a new apartment for our growing daughter, luxurious cars, and all the comforts one could desire. Life felt abundant. I held deep love for my wife and remained faithful to her throughout our marriage. I wasn't a heavy drinker, but occasionally I'd enjoy a glass of wine with dinner. I recently gave up smoking. We always planned our vacations together, and I developed a passion for diving and skiing. Well, my wife chose not to dive due to fear. She took up skiing. Our lives revolved around working, earning money, and savoring the rewards of our hard work. My wife's job was related to international business, often involving meetings with colleagues from abroad for negotiations. Gradually, I began to notice that her interactions with these colleagues appeared to be longer than before. While it initially piqued my curiosity, I didn't pay much attention to it at first. Another notable change was her receiving Snapchat messages in the evenings. Oddly, when her foreign colleagues were around, these messages stopped coming. A couple of times, I checked her phone after she had fallen asleep, but all the messages had been deleted. I observed that the last message consistently arrived around 7 p.m., even though her phone received notifications after she had already gone to bed. In the end, suspicion completely consumed me. One evening, she arrived home late, around 10 p.m., and I perhaps foolishly, jokingly inquired if she had bid farewell to her secret admirer. I witnessed fear in her eyes like never before. However, once she realized I was teasing, she smiled and dismissed it, calling me a fool. Furthermore, she occasionally traveled abroad to visit her colleagues. In return, when my suspicions peaked, I reached a breaking point. I resorted to installing spyware on her phone, enabling remote control through Sims or my personal account. This software could capture audio from her surroundings, take pictures with the camera, and send all the data to my personal account. One day, she embarked on another business trip, and in the evening, after spending time with our daughter, assisting her with homework, and putting her to bed by 10 p.m., I accessed the spyware account and instructed it to record her phone's surroundings for 10 minutes. A few minutes later, a recording popped up on my account, and upon listening, I heard my wife's voice in a room with a man. They conversed in English, and I comprehended every word. Their discussion revolved around ordinary life matters, accompanied by laughter. I realized they were alone in that room. Then, a sudden clinking of glasses. Amid their laughter sent my heart racing. At that instant, I sent another command to record for an additional 20 minutes and capture an image of the surroundings. Shockingly, the photo came out as a dark square, indicating the phone was placed with the camera facing down. Swiftly, I directed the program to snap a picture using the front camera. The resulting photo showed the phone resting on the bedside table in the room, partially capturing the bed's headboard and an adjacent wall lamp. 15 minutes later, another recording emerged, sending shivers down my spine as I played it. Their laughter and conversation filled my ears once more. I found myself in a state of disbelief and shock, as if my entire world were collapsing right before my eyes. Stunned, I poured myself a drink and instructed the program to record for an additional 4 hours, during which I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. The following morning, Thursday, I was utterly shattered. As it was time for my daughter to go to school, I informed her that she didn't need to attend classes that day. I also notified my boss that I would be taking a couple of personal days until Monday. My wife's expected return was on Sunday, so I settled down and began listening to the 4-hour recording. However, I could only bear to listen for 40 minutes because at that moment, I unmistakably heard the sounds of my wife's pleasure, the same sounds I had known for over 13 years. It felt like a sharp knife had pierced my heart, causing both emotional and physical anguish. Stunned and overwhelmed, I hurried to the bathroom, feeling nauseous. I couldn't tell if it was a hangover or the current situation causing it. I stood under a freezing shower for 20 minutes, desperately seeking relief. Afterward, I took our daughter to visit her grandparents, promising to explain everything later, and then returned home alone. During lunch, my wife called and genuinely inquired about my well-being. I stood there in silence, unable to utter a word, feigning a poor connection. I informed her that I wasn't feeling well and would stay home for a few days, entrusting our daughter to her grandmother's care. That day felt like the most agonizing of my life. I experienced a personal hell, feeling utterly lost and unsure of how to proceed. My mind was consumed by a constant buzzing that drowned out my own thoughts. I sat on the couch and wept like a child, overwhelmed by waves of anger and apathy. The more I let my emotions out, the more they seemed to numb me. By the end of the day, I was emotionally drained. In the evening, I returned to the spyware account and began giving commands to the phone. I received photos, some taken from her bag and others from the table. There were recordings of her performances in restaurants with numerous voices, presumably her colleague. Then, as the evening progressed, I stumbled upon something different. The phone was once again on the bedside table, capturing her voice along with someone else's. However, this time, there were no intimate sounds. Unable to endure it any longer, I called her after 4 rings. She answered, noticeably panting. I inquired about her heavy breathing, and she explained that the hotel elevator had broken down, forcing her to climb the stairs to her room. We talked for a while, and I did my best to maintain a calm and steady voice. Eventually, I mentioned that I was going to bed, wished her good night, hung up, and swiftly sent a command to the spy program requesting a rapid series of pictures. A rapid series of pictures were taken using the front camera. Her mistake occurred right then. After our call, she placed the phone not on the bedside table, but on the bed beside her. As a result, the front-facing camera started capturing slightly tilted but candid photos. These images revealed her sitting astride someone else with her head thrown back. Following that, there was a recording that captured unmistakable sounds, instantly exposing her actions. That was the final straw for me, and I documented these notes and materials. At that point, she had become a complete stranger to me. From that moment on, I refrained from further investigation until Sunday because everything had become painfully quiet. I was pondering my next steps. Should I pursue a divorce? What about a 6-year-old daughter? On Sunday, late at night, she returned home eager to kiss me. I pulled away, telling her I was still unwell. I had an urge to confront her and let my anger out. Instead, I retreated to the office and slept on the sofa. The following morning, I woke up before her, unable to bear being around her any longer, and headed to work. I endured the day mechanically, then approached my boss and urgently requested a week's vacation. I saved all the evidence on a flash drive and then called my wife. I told her I had to go on a one-day business trip, but asked her not to take our daughter away from her grandmother because I had a surprise planned for that night. When I returned home, I quickly packed my bag. She helped me pack, acting politely and innocently. However, her insincerity made me angry. I took my bag, left the USB drive on the bedroom nightstand, and called a taxi to our second apartment, the one set aside for our daughter. Once there, I called a friend and suggested going abroad for a few days. He agreed, and we hastily booked tickets for an early morning flight to Munich. It was in Munich that I confessed everything to him. We explored the city, socialized with other women, and to be honest, I no longer had any feelings for my wife. I ignored her calls and only messaged her to insert the USB drive into my laptop. After about 30 minutes, my phone started ringing nonstop. I received numerous messages, but I didn't care anymore, so I turned off my phone. We continued our adventures in Munich for 3 more days before I flew back home on Saturday. When I returned, I turned on my phone and it took me 5 minutes to go through a bunch of messages from my wife. However, I chose not to read them because I was afraid of getting confused. Before going into the apartment, when I entered, it was oddly quiet inside. I quietly placed my bag down, removed my shoes, and was about to wash my hands when she emerged from the bedroom. Oh my goodness, I had never seen her looking so disheveled and swollen, with tears streaming down her face. She dropped to her knees, trying to explain something incoherently amidst her sobs and tears. I maintained a stoic expression, urging her not to make a scene. Then, in a composed manner, I asked her about her next steps. She begged me for forgiveness once again, drowning in tears and mucus. She admitted she had made a terrible mistake, claiming she didn't understand how things had come to this point. She even started calling herself names. But, I realized that I no longer felt sympathy or anger towards her. She cried out that she loved me and had always loved only me, and that all of this had happened because she had been foolish. She realized during my absence that she had ruined our relationship, but as they say, revenge is best served cold. I told her that we were no longer husband and wife, just mom and dad for our daughter. We would pretend everything was okay between us, but I would live my life, and she could live hers. She was no longer the only one in my life. She was just my partner in raising our child. Maybe someday I'll change my mind, but for now, the thought of being intimate with her makes me sick. By the way, I told her where I had been and what I had been doing. She said she understood everything and was willing to endure whatever it took. Well, no one forced her to speak. As a result, we now share the same apartment. Although, to be honest, I've already purchased another one for myself and put it in my father's name to avoid property disputes. I spend most of my time sleeping in the office, although occasionally I sleep in the bedroom for my daughter's sake. There have been a few times when my wife tried to hug me when we shared a bed, but I rejected her firmly. It's been 3 months since we were intimate. She hasn't confided in her parents. Only your father knows about my situation. We agreed to take a family vacation once a year for a week, but now we'd have separate beds. I often hang out with friends and have made new acquaintances, including some attractive women. Sometimes I wonder when she'll reach a breaking point and leave or file for divorce, but she hasn't yet. I frequently catch her staring at me like a scared cat, but honestly, I don't. Even though I see her making efforts, I find satisfaction in her pain. Recently, I provocatively placed a pack of condoms on my office desk to taunt her. Despite her reaction, she entered the office to say something, noticed the condoms on the table, and hurried out, probably in tears. She still goes to work, but she doesn't stay late anymore, although I don't really keep tabs on her. At some point, she tried to explain to me that she had severed all non-business ties with another man. It seems she'll still need to communicate with him for work-related matters, but she swears she doesn't approach him now. By the way, that guy also has a family. I told her that her relationships with sexual partners are none of my concern, and she's free to do as she pleases. She doesn't need to inform me about her intimate encounters. I also stay out late sometimes now, leaving when my daughter goes to bed. On Friday nights, for example, I don't hold back when it comes to having fun with my friends. When it comes to my desires, if I want sex, in the morning, I go to the office to sleep or to the bedroom if she's not there anymore. There haven't been any changes in our daily routine at home. I continue to do the grocery shopping, and I enjoy cooking. We still have a housekeeper for cleaning, so that aspect remains the same. I've been covering the rent for the apartment, and I still am. I'm not concerned about how or if she's spending her money. Our communication is limited to our daughter or her parents when they visit, although I have a feeling that if I were to tell my mother-in-law, she might confront her right in front of me. I have a good relationship with my mother-in-law. She's a smart woman who values family strongly. This is probably one reason why my wife doesn't want to leave. It seems like she's afraid of her mom because she knows her mother would ask what's going on. And I won't lie. In general, I tease my wife as much as I can, and I find enjoyment in it. Yes, maybe I've become somewhat of a monster now, but she's the one who brought this out in me. And you know what surprises me? Her persistence and patience. It's like a challenge to me. I wonder how much more she can endure. And please don't start with the whole "she's the mother of your child" argument. She didn't care much about that when she was involved with that guy for half a year, going on business trips or having affairs in this city without thinking about our daughter or her husband. Like, no comment. Whenever I feel like I might soften, I remember that day and what I felt, and it strengthens my resolve. I become unyielding again. So this is how I'm living now. Our daughter is doing well, we're good parents, and I still help her with her schoolwork in the evenings. Our mutual friends are unaware of our situation. Maybe when I get tired of tormenting her, or decide enough is enough, I'll switch off my hostile mode and have a conversation with her. But not right now. I'm stubborn, teen. Thank you.